Hi. You're watching Reddit Confessions. This story still feels like a bad dream I never woke up from. But I lived it. Every uncomfortable second. And if you're watching this, maybe some part of you has too. So here's how it happened, exactly as I remember it. The kitchen smelled like burnt toast and cheap vanilla candles. It was a Tuesday. Not that it matters. But I remember, because I'd just finished unclogging the bathroom sink, and my socks were still wet when she dropped the words on me like bricks. She didn't cry. She didn't even flinch. She was slicing strawberries into a bowl and said, like she was telling me we were out of milk. I'm pregnant. But it's not yours. Don't freak out. I figured you'd take care of it anyway. That's the sentence. That exact sentence. And I know I should have screamed. Or slammed something. Or at least asked who. But all I did was laugh. This little, pitiful, high-pitched laugh that I couldn't control. Like my body was trying to shut down the horror before it reached my chest. She kept slicing strawberries. One dropped to the floor, and I watched her foot slide over it like nothing happened. I was still gripping the wrench from the sink job, my fingers white. And somewhere in my head, I kept thinking. This isn't how betrayal is supposed to happen. This is too quiet. Too normal. So I sat down. Not because I wanted to, because my knees buckled, and the stool was the only thing that caught me. I asked, in the dumbest, softest voice. Are you serious? She nodded. She even popped a strawberry into her mouth and chewed with a shrug. Then she said something I'll never forget. You've always wanted to be a dad, Clay. This could still work. Still. Work. As if we were partners in a group project. As if she hadn't just torn our life into ribbons. There was no affair talk. No apology. Just that strawberry-scented air and her mouth still chewing while mine was open in disbelief. And I swear to you, I just stood up, walked to the front door, and stepped out without a jacket. It was raining. I didn't even notice. I didn't slam the door. I didn't say goodbye. I just left my whole life standing there barefoot on the kitchen tiles. And the worst part? She didn't call after me. Didn't follow. Didn't text. She just let me go. Like I was the milk she forgot to buy. Like I was no one. And the truth? That was only the beginning. Because what I found out next. Who the father was. Why she really told me. It made the betrayal feel like the warm-up. It's strange how rain can soak your clothes, your shoes, even your skin, but not numb the kind of cold you feel inside when your entire life collapses in 5 words. I walked around for hours that night, no destination, no phone, just my keys in one pocket and my dignity slipping out the other. I wandered into the old Glenridge neighborhood, the one with the cracked sidewalks and those ridiculous lawn flamingos, and for some reason, I just kept walking in circles. I think part of me hoped someone would stop and ask if I was okay. But they didn't. People don't look too long at a soaked man with no umbrella. By the time I finally stopped, I was sitting on a bench outside a 24-hour laundromat, across from a payphone that probably hadn't worked since the 90s. I remember staring at it, wondering if this was rock bottom or just the entry point. I didn't cry. Not because I didn't want to, because I physically couldn't. I was too numb to produce a single tear. I stayed there until morning. The sky turned this ugly shade of gray, like even the universe couldn't be bothered to put on a show. I made the mistake of going back home. I don't know what I expected. An apology? Regret? Maybe even a note on the fridge saying, we should talk. But the place looked exactly the same. Except she wasn't there. No shoes by the door. No coffee brewing. No sign of her. Just a half-eaten bowl of strawberries on the kitchen counter and the faint hum of the fridge. I thought maybe she'd gone to work early. But something told me it wasn't that simple. So I did what I'd never done before in our marriage, I opened her laptop. No password. Why had I never tried this before? Maybe because I wanted to believe she had nothing to hide. Maybe because I was too afraid to find out she did. There were messages. Dozens of them. I didn't even have to search, one thread was still open. The name at the top of the chat window? Reed. No last name. Just Reed. The messages? I'll never forget them. Reed, did you tell him yet? Harper, yeah. He froze. Typical. Reed, bet he'll still raise it. He's too soft to walk away. Harper, I'm counting on it. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. I just stared at the screen like it was playing some terrible soap opera and I was the clueless husband character everyone pities. But then I did something even I didn't expect from myself. I clicked on Reed's profile. And my stomach dropped into my knees. It wasn't just some random guy. It wasn't a coworker. It was my cousin. My actual blood cousin. Reed Metzer. The same guy who used to crash on our couch when he couldn't hold down a job. The same guy I defended when my family called him reckless. The same guy who borrowed $500 from me just 6 months ago, money I never saw again. He'd been in our home. At our table. Laughing with her while I was doing dishes in the background. And I'd missed it all. Everything. My hands started shaking, and for a second, I thought I was going to vomit. Not because of the betrayal itself, but because I'd let it in. I'd let him in. I closed the laptop. Packed a duffel bag. And for the first time in my life, I turned off my phone without leaving a message. I drove out of the city with no clue where I was going. But anywhere was better than that kitchen. Better than that bowl of strawberries. Better than her. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want justice. I just wanted silence, because inside my head, everything was screaming. But fate wasn't done with me yet. Because 5 days later, I got a message that would flip everything I thought I knew, again. And this time, it came from Reed. I didn't open the message for 2 days. I saw the name pop up on my lock screen, Reed Metzer, and my entire chest went tight. I was holed up in a rundown motel off Route 19 with flickering lights and a vending machine that gave me crackers when I pressed the button for chips. There was a guy next door who coughed all night and kept slamming drawers. I'd barely slept. I looked like a ghost, and frankly, I felt like one. I stared at Reed's message like it might explode if I opened it. But on day 3, something inside me cracked. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the way the cheap mattress springs dug into my back. Or maybe I just couldn't stand not knowing what else he thought he had the right to say. I opened it. Callie's lying to both of us. You need to hear everything. I don't care if you hate me. You deserve to know. At first, I thought it was just more of the same. An excuse. Some sleazy damage control from the guy who blew up my marriage with my wife and a few clicks of his keyboard. But then he sent a second message. I didn't know she was pregnant until 3 days ago. And I didn't know she told you it was mine. Wait, what? My heart started pounding in that chaotic, disoriented way, like when you hear a noise in your house at 2 a.m., and you're too scared to move. I wanted to ignore him. To block him and delete everything. But something told me I needed to dig. I typed. What are you talking about? It's yours. She said it is. His reply came instantly. No. She's been sleeping with more than one guy. I wasn't the only one. And when she told me she was pregnant, she said she didn't think it was mine. Then 2 hours later, she blocked me. You really think that's normal? I felt nauseous. Again. But it didn't stop there. He sent a photo. A screenshot of a message Harper had sent him 2 weeks earlier, before she ever told me anything. "Harper, if things go bad with Clay, I might tell him it's yours. You're easier to deal with if he freaks out." That line hit me harder than the original confession. If things go bad with Clay. I'd been reduced to a variable. A backup plan. A shield. Someone she could weaponize to protect herself from the fallout of her own chaos. It wasn't about love. It wasn't even about betrayal. It was strategy. And that, somehow, was worse. I slumped down against the motel wall, my back pressed to the peeling wallpaper, phone still glowing in my hand. I'd never hated myself more. Because all this time, I'd blamed Reed. I'd imagined her as manipulated, cornered, pressured. But no, she'd choreographed it. Moved the pieces herself. And I, the loyal husband, the quiet fixer, the man who once begged her to consider couples therapy, was the easiest one to sacrifice. I called Reed. I don't know why. The second he answered, I nearly hung up. But I needed to hear it. All of it. He told me they'd hooked up once. A drunken night months ago. She told him afterward that it was a mistake and blocked him for a while. Then, out of nowhere, she messaged him again, asking for help. When he asked what kind of help, she told him she was pregnant, maybe with his child, and needed him to stay quiet if her husband ever asked questions. She made me swear I'd never say anything, he said. But I didn't know she'd throw me under the bus. I didn't say much. I just let him talk. At one point, I think he cried. But I felt nothing. Not sympathy. Not anger. Just this dull, echoing numbness. When we hung up, I sat in silence, staring at the worn carpet under my feet. She hadn't just cheated. She'd spun a narrative. Played us both. Lied with the kind of confidence only someone who's done it before can manage. And the worst part? I still missed her. Somewhere in my broken mind, I kept seeing her sitting cross-legged on our old couch, laughing at some dumb sitcom, fingers digging into a bowl of popcorn. I kept hearing her morning voice, raspy, tired, calling me sunshine, even though I was always the gloomier one. How do you kill a memory that won't stop smiling at you? I didn't have answers. I just knew I couldn't go back to that house. That life. That person I was. But fate has a way of dragging you back to the things you try to run from. And 2 days later, my name came up in an HR investigation at Harper's job. Something I wasn't ready for. Something that would connect the final dots in her twisted game, and leave me staring into a mess even uglier than I imagined. I was sitting in the same motel room, same flickering light overhead, when my phone buzzed again, this time from an unknown number. I hesitated, not because I feared who it might be, but because I was tired. Bone tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from watching your entire life unravel like a slow, cruel magic trick. I let it buzz twice more before picking up. I didn't say anything, just held the phone to my ear like some dazed ghost waiting for instructions. The voice on the other end was calm. Too calm. "Mr. Metzer, this is Lydia Marks. I'm calling from Waystone Group's internal affairs. I'm sorry to bother you, but your name came up in a complaint involving Harper Metzer. We need to ask you a few questions." I blinked. Sat up a little. I'm sorry, what? "There's a formal review taking place concerning your wife's professional conduct," the woman continued. "It seems your name was used in company records, and we need to confirm a few details. Specifically, were you present during a company off-site meeting at the Radcliffe Inn 2 weeks ago?" I nearly laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was just so absurd. "No," I muttered. "I've never even heard of that place." The line went quiet for a second. "I see," the voice said. "That's helpful. I appreciate your time." Click. I just sat there, staring at the wall, mouth hanging open. What in the world had Harper dragged me into? It didn't take long for the truth to surface. I texted Reed, asking if he knew anything about the Radcliffe Inn. He replied instantly. Wait. You mean the sales summit Harper bragged about? She said you two stayed the weekend there. I froze. Not because she'd lied, at this point, I was numb to that, but because she had used me as an alibi in a professional setting. She was dragging my name through the mud now, and for what? That night, I did something I swore I never would. I drove back into the city. Not to talk to her, I wasn't that stupid, but to confront something I hadn't yet faced, my house. The place we built together. The walls I painted. The floor I knelt on to propose to her in the middle of winter with a ring I paid off in monthly installments for over a year. That house was haunted now, and not by ghosts, but by silence and memories that mocked me. I got there around midnight. Her car wasn't in the driveway. The porch light was off. Still, I walked in. My key still worked. That hurt more than I expected, like some twisted permission to step back into the life that had already spit me out. Everything was normal. Which made it worse. Her favorite throw blanket was draped across the couch. The air still smelled faintly like her dry shampoo. And sitting on the counter was a receipt from a luxury spa, with a time and date that matched the day she told me she was working late. I wandered into the bedroom. The sheets had been changed, something I always used to do. She never cared much about laundry. But now they were lavender-scented, neatly folded, tucked tight. Almost like someone else had been there. The worst moment, though, came when I opened the closet and saw the empty space where my things used to be. The hangers were gone. The drawers that once held my old concert shirts, my socks, the flannel she always borrowed, all of it had been cleared out. She hadn't called. She hadn't texted. She hadn't even asked where I was. But she'd erased me like a coffee stain she was tired of scrubbing. That was when I really understood, she hadn't just cheated. She'd replaced me. Like I was a placeholder until she could rebuild her life the way she wanted, shinier, flashier, cleaner. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't have predicted, was that someone from her own company had reached out to me again the next morning. This time, it was Lydia, again, but her tone was different. Warmer. Like she had something she wanted to share but wasn't sure she should. I thought you might want to know, she said slowly, there are discrepancies. It appears your wife listed you as attending several client events where questionable charges were submitted. The compliance team is digging, but you're not under investigation. In fact, we'd appreciate your help confirming what's true and what isn't. In other words, Harper had forged my name. Repeatedly. My betrayal wasn't just emotional. It wasn't just physical. It was financial. Legal. Professional. She was unraveling everything I'd spent years building, and using my name to do it. That's when something inside me shifted. Not into rage. Not even into revenge. It was something colder. It was detachment. If she could treat me like a character in her fantasy, someone she could write in and out of scenes as needed, then maybe it was time I took control of the ending. Because Harper didn't know it yet, but I wasn't just going to walk away this time. I was going to take everything she didn't think I had in me, and I was going to leave her with exactly what she deserved. And it would all start with the meeting I scheduled that afternoon, with her HR director, and her boss. I was never the kind of guy who walked into rooms with a plan. I'd always been more of a let things unfold type. But sitting across from Lydia Marks, the HR director for Waystone Group, something about me felt different. Maybe it was the weight of everything I'd carried for weeks, or maybe it was the fact that I had nothing left to lose. I wasn't Clay the nice husband anymore. I wasn't even Clay the doormat. I was just a guy who had been lied to, erased, and used, and for the first time in my life, I was finally awake to it. Lydia looked nervous. She tapped her pen against her notepad like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to be compassionate. Her office smelled like vanilla-scented disinfectant, and there were motivational posters on the walls. Success starts with integrity. The irony practically vibrated off the drywall. I appreciate you coming in, she said, her voice low, measured. Before we continue, I need to ask, do you have legal representation? I gave a half-hearted laugh. I'm not here to sue anybody, Lydia. I'm just here to tell the truth. She nodded, folded her hands, and pressed record on a little silver device sitting between us. It didn't take long. I told her I hadn't attended any work events. That I'd never even met her boss in person. That the spa trip Harper submitted for reimbursement was not a couple's getaway, but something she clearly took on her own, or worse, with someone else. Lydia's eyes widened slightly, but she kept her composure. Then, without looking at me, she slid a folder across the desk. Inside were copies of company expense reports, digital photos, and, most damning of all, a signed letter Harper had submitted to finance that included a glowing review of our stay together, and how Clay Metzer expressed deep interest in investing in Waystone properties. It was my signature. Almost perfect. But it wasn't mine. I just sat there, holding the paper like it might crumble if I blinked too hard. She forged that? I finally asked. Lydia nodded. We confirmed with our compliance team. And Clay, that's a felony. I didn't respond. Because deep down, I knew Harper wasn't just reckless. She was deliberate. This wasn't the result of panic. This was premeditated. Clean. Cold. I left that meeting with a copy of the evidence and a 100-pound pit in my chest. Not because I was scared for her. Not because I wanted to protect her. But because I finally realized how little she ever thought of me. I wasn't her partner. I was her cover. Her prop. And that night, as if fate wasn't finished twisting the knife, I got a text from her. No apology. No explanation. Just. We need to talk. Can you come home tomorrow morning? It's important. I stared at the message for what felt like hours. I imagined a million different scenarios. Maybe she was going to come clean. Maybe she was going to try to twist things again. Maybe she'd pretend none of it mattered. I didn't reply. Instead, I showed up the next morning. Not to talk, but to finally end the show. She was already in the kitchen, hair curled, makeup done like she was trying to look her most innocent. The bowl of strawberries was back, just like that night. I almost laughed. It was like she was trying to recreate the scene like a bad director reshooting a failed scene in a movie. Hey, she said gently. Thanks for coming. I didn't sit down. I didn't take off my coat. I pulled the folder from my bag and dropped it on the counter. She didn't open it right away. She just stared at it. Then back at me. Then forced a smile. What's this supposed to be? You already know. She flipped through the pages slowly. When she reached the forged letter, I watched her throat tighten. She didn't deny it. Didn't gasp. Just calmly closed the folder, took a breath, and said, "You're being dramatic." Those 3 words. That tone. Like I was the one out of control. I wanted to scream. But I didn't. Instead, I said the one sentence I'd been practicing in my head ever since Reed sent me those screenshots. You're going to admit what you did, not to me, but to your company. Or I will. Her jaw tensed. You wouldn't. I already had the meeting. I'm giving you the option to face it on your own terms. That's more grace than you deserve. She leaned back against the counter like her body couldn't support her weight anymore. For the first time, I saw panic. Real panic. Not the manipulative kind. The real thing. Then she said it. Clay. I can't lose this job. The moment was so absurd I wanted to laugh. You already did, I replied. You just don't know it yet. She didn't cry. Harper never cried when it mattered. But she did something I hadn't expected. She asked me to stay. Just until things cool down, she whispered. Just until I figure out what to do. She wanted me to pretend again. To be the shield. The mask. The quiet placeholder husband who stood in the background while she recalibrated the mess she made. And in that moment, I knew for certain, I'd rather sleep in a car than under a roof where I was nothing but a convenient illusion. I didn't answer her. I walked out, got in my car, and started driving. But the story wasn't over. Because 2 days later, I received a message from a woman I'd never met before. And what she told me, it made everything I thought I knew about Harper look like child's play. The message came in just after 11 p.m. I was staying in a short-term rental by the freeway, the kind of place that looked clean in photos but smelled like damp carpet and regret. I was scrolling through apartment listings I couldn't afford when the notification lit up my phone. The name meant nothing to me, Jillian Moore. But the first line of her message stopped my heart cold. You don't know me, but I worked with your wife. I think you deserve to know what she's been doing. My first reaction wasn't curiosity. It was exhaustion. I was so emotionally depleted that part of me wanted to delete the message and roll over. But something told me not to. Something told me Jillian's name was going to be the next earthquake in a series of aftershocks that hadn't yet finished breaking me. I replied with a simple, "Go on." She didn't hesitate. What she told me unraveled the last threads of whatever hope I had left for who Harper used to be, or who I thought she was. According to Jillian, Harper hadn't just used me for her work reimbursements. She hadn't just forged my name or cheated with my cousin. That was the shallow end of her deception. No, Harper had been running something darker. It started with perks, spa weekends, resort visits, luxury client dinners. But over time, Jillian noticed patterns. Harper wasn't just enjoying the benefits, she was selling them. Reselling resort points and luxury event access gifted to employees through corporate partnerships. She had a side operation, covert and polished, offering these perks to clients through a personal contacts list, for cash. Untraceable, off the books, and as far as anyone in her company knew, completely invisible. And here's the kicker, she listed me as her financial partner. She built the entire scheme around a fictional LLC, a small business supposedly registered in both our names. On paper, it looked like a side consulting gig. She used my name to legitimize transfers. My name to authorize bookings. My name to open a separate checking account with forged documents that showed Clayton Metzer as co-owner. And I hadn't seen a cent. Not a single dollar. The amount she'd siphoned over 14 months. According to Jillian, north of $82,000. I didn't say anything before because I was afraid, Jillian wrote. But now that HR's involved, and I heard your name came up, I couldn't stay quiet. You're not the first person she's used. Just the one who stayed the longest. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My hands trembled so violently I dropped the phone onto the nightstand. I sat there for nearly 30 minutes, staring at the dark ceiling, replaying every memory I'd ever thought was pure, our wedding day, our first apartment, her voice whispering, "You're my calm place," into my ear on the night I got laid off. All of it, a performance. I wasn't a husband. I was a name tag. A financial identity she wore like a coat when it rained. And then I remembered the baby. The one she swore wasn't mine. What if the pregnancy wasn't just a betrayal, but a plan? Another layer in her warped logic. What if it was a way to anchor me to her forever? To keep the illusion alive while she bled me dry? My stomach turned. I rushed to the bathroom and threw up nothing but water and air. When I finally caught my breath, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I called my brother. I hadn't told him much, only that Harper and I were separated, and that I was working through some stuff. But now, I laid it all out. Every ugly detail. From the forged expenses to the fake business to the pregnancy lie and the tangled wreckage with Reed. He listened quietly. Said only 2 words when I finished. Get a lawyer. The next morning, I did. And the more the attorney uncovered, the deeper the hole became. There were credit accounts opened in both our names. Purchase histories that traced back to high-end stores I'd never set foot in. And something else, a safety deposit box registered under her maiden name, paid for using our joint account. I signed off on a formal financial audit. I filed paperwork to freeze all accounts. I filed for divorce. I wish I could say I felt relief. Closure. Some poetic sense of peace. But the truth? I just felt hollow. Because no matter how many steps I took, the memories didn't vanish. Her voice still echoed in my mind. That bowl of strawberries. That smug smile. That cold sentence I'll never forget. You'll take care of it. I wasn't sure what she meant anymore, the baby. The mess. The cover-up. Maybe all of it. But one thing was certain, I wasn't her caretaker anymore. And I was about to make sure she knew it. Because the audit revealed something Harper didn't expect. Something that turned this entire game on its head. And when I confronted her, it was finally her turn to fall apart. The financial audit pulled no punches. There it was, in black and white, a detailed trail of Harper's schemes. 10 different consulting deposits funneled through the fake business she created. My name on every contract. My social security number attached to transactions that looked so legitimate, even the IRS hadn't blinked, yet. But what really froze my blood wasn't the money. It wasn't even the fake LLC or the luxury goods she charged to accounts she never told me existed. It was the last file my lawyer handed me, a scanned notarized document Harper submitted 2 months earlier. It was titled, Statement of Parental Financial Responsibility. And my name was on it. Again. She hadn't just told me I'd be taking care of a baby that wasn't mine, she had made it official in the eyes of the law. She submitted paperwork claiming that I had agreed to assume financial responsibility for the child regardless of paternity. She forged my signature. She filed it under the state's voluntary acknowledgement process, likely hoping I'd never contest it once the child arrived. And if I had never walked away, if I hadn't investigated, I wouldn't have had a choice. I'd be legally bound. It was the most evil kind of manipulation, slow, paper-thin, executed with calm precision. And it almost worked. My lawyer, bless her, was a quiet bulldog in heels. She looked up from the documents and said, Clay, we're going to file criminal charges for identity fraud. And we're going to challenge paternity preemptively. But if you want to confront her, now's the time. I didn't want to see Harper again. I didn't want to breathe the same air as her. But I knew this couldn't end with lawyers and documents. I needed her to look me in the eye and realize that I knew. That the game was over. That the image she built, the loyal wife, the savvy professional, the expectant mother with the soft voice and beautiful lies, had burned to the ground. I arranged a meeting through her company. Not at home. Not somewhere she could spin the story. A formal conference room. 2 witnesses present. Her face when she walked in, thinking maybe I was there to beg or crawl or settle, turned to ash the moment she saw the folders on the table. I didn't stand. I didn't smile. I simply said, sit. She did. I opened the first folder. The fake LLC paperwork. This is fraud, I said quietly. You knew that when you created it. You attached my name to a business I never agreed to. That's a felony. She blinked, but said nothing. I opened the next. The spa charges. The false alibis. The signed letter from the resort manager that stated she attended alone, yet submitted receipts listing Clayton Metzer as a co-guest. I never stepped foot there, I continued. But you used me like a ghost. Like a mannequin in a suit who'd never speak up. Her mouth opened slightly. Not to deny it, but to formulate her next move. She was calculating. Always had been. But then I dropped the last folder. The paternity claim. She flinched. Actually flinched. I don't know who the father is, I said, but I know who isn't. And you tried to lock me in with this, you tried to bind me to a child just to keep the lie alive. That was when she broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. She didn't scream or throw things. Harper was too controlled for that. She simply fell back in her chair and exhaled. Like the act of maintaining the mask had finally exhausted her. I didn't know it would go this far, she whispered. I looked at her for what felt like the first time, truly looked. Not as the woman I married, or the person I once shared Sunday mornings with. I saw someone I didn't recognize. Someone capable of carefully, coldly rewriting reality to benefit herself, no matter the cost to others. And I told her the one thing I hadn't said since the beginning. I don't hate you, Harper. But I'll never forgive you. Not for cheating. Not for lying. But for turning my life into your insurance policy. She didn't respond. The meeting ended. She left without a word. I walked to my car and sat in silence. Not triumphant. Not satisfied. Just, done. But the story wasn't quite over. Because a week later, just as I was starting to imagine closure, I got a letter from the state. A formal notice. It wasn't from her. It was about her. And what was inside changed everything. One final secret. One last betrayal. And this time, it was something she never wanted anyone to know. The letter was short. 5 paragraphs. Stamped by the state attorney's office and marked, confidential. I read it twice before I even breathed. It confirmed that Harper had been placed under formal investigation, not just for financial misconduct, but for multiple counts of document fraud, identity misuse, and state-level deception tied to the paternity forms she submitted under my name. Apparently, I wasn't the first man she had manipulated on paper, only the one who finally stood up. But the final paragraph, that was the one that caught me off guard. It said Harper had voluntarily resigned from her position at Waystone Group. She had disappeared from the city entirely. The note closed with, "You may be contacted as a witness if further charges are filed. At present, you are not under investigation. We thank you for your cooperation." And just like that, it was over. No courtroom spectacle. No final face-off. Just a quiet letter, in a quiet room, in the hands of a man who had spent years being too quiet himself. That night, I went for a walk. No destination, no headphones, no noise. Just me and the late October wind pressing against my coat. I passed by a playground where Harper and I used to talk about, someday, the future, the maybe kids, the slow aging together. I stopped for a moment, but I didn't feel anger. Not anymore. I felt clean. Light. Like I'd finally stepped out of a dream I didn't realize had turned into a nightmare. In the weeks that followed, I moved to a different part of the city. Got a small apartment. Started working part-time at a local outreach nonprofit that helped people escape financial abuse. The irony wasn't lost on me. I also got back into playing the guitar, something I'd given up when Harper said it made me look like I was trying too hard to be interesting. Funny how voices like that stick with you. But I'm learning to replace hers with my own again. And then, one afternoon, something happened that surprised me more than anything else in this entire story. I smiled. Genuinely. Fully. I was sitting in a coffee shop, reading a book, when a kid nearby knocked over an entire tray of drinks. Caramel and whipped cream exploded across the floor. The mom looked panicked, frazzled, ready to snap. But the kid just looked up at her, wide-eyed, and said, "I tried to save the smallest one first." And something about that made me laugh, hard. It was the first time I felt joy not tied to survival. Not in spite of everything. But because I had finally made room for something new. The past didn't own me anymore. And Harper. She was just a chapter. Not the whole story. I won't lie to you, healing isn't a montage. There's no dramatic background music. Just slow mornings. Quiet changes. New boundaries. But for the first time in years, I feel like me again. The real me. The version I kept burying to protect someone who never saw my worth until it was too late. Thanks for watching this journey on Reddit Confessions. Now I want to hear from you. Was there a moment in this story that hit home? Have you ever been someone's placeholder before finding your peace? Drop a comment below and let's talk about it. And if this story meant something to you, hit that subscribe button and join us again next week for another raw, real confession from someone who finally spoke up. Until next time, stay strong, and never let someone else write your ending.